my parents didn't teach me anything about money. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make culturally is money is such a taboo subject that it's even taboo from teaching our kids. Or I think a lot of parents, and I've talked to people that feel this way, they didn't feel like they knew what they were talking about, so they didn't teach the kids anything.
Yeah. I have buddies right now I could call and talk to right now, and they would ask you, hey, what was Eric like in college? And they tell you he was cheap. I was broke.
Right.
It's not that I was cheap. I had no money. I was broke.
You didn't
and
have
so
a choice.
I had to be very specific about the things that I spend money on.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have it, you learn very quickly, how far that dollar is going to go. And I learned very quickly how I could stretch it quite a bit to have as much fun as I did in college and with the little money as I did have. But it's interesting because those are almost self-taught.
Yeah.
Eric Douglas, Chris Vaughn here from Family Wealth Planning Partners with another edition of Retirement Planning Happy Hour. Thanks for joining us today. Interesting topic. Yep. Not so much X's and O's today. We're going to talk a little bit more around the psychology of money, or more specifically, where we learn about money and investments.
Usually
finance,
bad places.
Right, and economics and all these things that kind of infiltrate our world as financial advisors. Where is it that we see most people learning about these things and then in turn teaching their kids and the next generation these things, just, to kind of put everything under one umbrella, money, the topic of money. How do we learn and how do we speak about money to one another? And so with that, I'll let you talk about the bourbon, which is one I have never tried, and I'm pretty excited to try it.
I think you're going to like this one. This was, so today we are doing the Old Granddad 16 year. Now, this was a one-time release back in 2024, way back a year ago, right?
Feels like it.
But
it feels like
yeah,
a long,
sometimes
long time
it does.
ago.
Anyway, this was a one-time release, so this is a limited edition that Jim Beam did down in Clearmont, Kentucky. It is... It's supposed to harken back to the older ways of doing things. I don't know if that's true or not. It is kind of an old-fashioned looking bottle. I can tell you that Old Granddad 114 proof is one of the best bang for your buck bourbons out there. It's $25 to $30 and it's outstanding. And they're using the same bottle, but they're putting the ribbon on there and a nicer looking label, that kind of stuff. I think you're going to like this one. I will say that they did make it very clear this is a one-time release. So when these bottles are gone, they're gone. And this is not a cheap one. Retail on this is $200.
Really?
So, yeah. So hopefully it's going to be worth it. We've had the conversation about Beanie Babies in the past. So anyway, that's what we're drinking today. Something a little bit old-fashioned.
Little high rye.
It is a high rye.
My first taste of it, definitely. There's definitely a lot of rye there.
Yeah, it's I think it's 27% rye, which is higher than average. Most of them are in the 15 to 20 range. Yeah. And when you get into the higher rye bourbons, you tend to get that spicier flavor in there, which I like that sometimes. I don't like that sometimes. So we'll find out.
There's some spice, but we'll come back to that. So going back to money, how we learn about money.
Yeah.
And, this is, I feel like this is going to get pretty broad today.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
And this is going to go down several different rabbit holes, I think. But, where do you think we should start? You want to start about how as kids, where we learn about money?
I think that's where we should start, because the first place that you learn about money is while you're a kid. And you can say, well, my parents didn't teach me anything about money. Yeah, they did. They might not have done it on purpose, but they did. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make culturally is money is such a taboo subject that it's even taboo from teaching our kids. Or I think a lot of parents, and I've talked to people that feel this way, they didn't feel like they knew what they were talking about, so they didn't teach the kids anything. Well, yeah, you did teach them stuff, and you probably taught them some pretty bad habits. I mean, think about the number of conversations you've had with friends, family, clients, just the people that you come into where you talk about it. And the number of times that moms and dads fight about money, well, you're teaching the kids. You're teaching the kids that money is stressful, blah, blah, blah. When mom and dad are struggling financially, you're teaching the kids most likely some bad monetary habits. On the other hand, if you're making it a point to show that you're saving, maybe not the amount, I don't think that's needed, but that you are saving for something. Teaching your kids, young children, We set money aside for rainy day funds. You remember that one? You don't have to tell them it's about retirement. A 5-year-old doesn't get that, but you are saving for something in the future. We teach kids about being charitable. You don't need to tell your kids how much money you're putting in the offering plate, but they need to see you doing it. They need to see those actions, because that's how kids learn, is by watching, observation of their parents. That's kind of our first step.
It's not so much about what you say, but what you do.
Right.
That they're learning because they're watching always. Constantly.
It's amazing how much they learn from watching.
For better or worse, as you know, we've all experienced, I'm sure, as parents of young kids. But it is interesting because even thinking back to my childhood, and my dad was an advisor. Mm-hmm. Going back to my childhood, it's not like we really talked that much about money.
Which is really amazing, because that's what he did for a living.
Yeah, well, he didn't get into it until when I was a young child. He was not an advisor. He switched careers when I was in high school. So growing up, he was not in this business as a financial advisor. So it wasn't, he and I had a lot more in-depth conversations as obviously I got older and I came into the business, and, it was more adult to adult conversations than it was necessarily learning, or teaching your kid. So going back to my childhood, no, I did not really learn too terribly much from conversations I had with either one of my parents about money. I knew we didn't have a lot of it, to be perfectly blunt, because I knew that there were, not that I was not destitute. That's not what I'm saying by any means, but there were definitely kids that had things that I did not. I very vividly remember after Black Monday in 1987 when my dad stock market crash. For those of you that don't know what Black Monday was, it was like 24% in one day. Mm-hmm. Everybody freaked out. My dad was in the business. He was not an advisor, but he was working for a fund company, basically as a wholesaler. And he lost his job almost overnight because of Black Monday in 1987. And so we went from living in a pretty nice house to moving into an apartment pretty much overnight. And so we had to change our lifestyles significantly. And at the time, I didn't really think much about that. But when you look back on it now as an adult and think about if I were to do that to my kids, how dramatic of a lifestyle switch that is. And it was definitely quite a bit different, right? Yep. And so I learned that I learned pretty quickly the value of money, because when you don't have it, you learn very quickly how valuable it is, and when you get it, you want to try to hold on to it. And even today, that definitely influences a lot of the decisions that I make. I used to get called cheap in college all the time. Yeah. I have buddies right now I could call and talk to right now, and they would ask you, "Hey, what was Eric like in college?" And they tell you he was cheap. I was broke. Right. It's not that I was cheap. I had no money. I was broke.
You didn't have a choice.
I had to be very specific about the things that I spend money on. Yeah. Because when you don't have it, you learn very quickly, how far that dollar is going to go. And I learned very quickly how I could stretch it quite a bit to have as much fun as I did in college and with as little money as I did have. But it's interesting because those are almost self-taught. Yeah. Right. A lot of my experiences were self-taught, and I was forced to learn a lot about money by not having it. Mm-hmm. And I was able, and really looking back, I'm probably grateful for that experience, because as I've grown up, I know the value of money, and obviously I'm able to help speak about that in my everyday life and what we do. But it's just thinking back to my experiences, I didn't learn anything in school. My dad wasn't.
Oh, you were taught nothing in school.
Taught nothing in school. Nothing in school. And I was surrounded by peers for the most part that didn't really come from a lot of money either. So I certainly wasn't talking about money with any of my peers, except to say that, yeah, none of us had it. Right. So it's almost like a mindset, and I'm glad I kind of switched peer groups when I went to college, because I started being around people that had a lot more money, and it started to get me thinking differently, quite a bit differently, as a matter of fact, about money and the value of money and how to make it and how to earn it, right? Yep. As opposed to kind of working the 9 to 5 and working for someone else, taking a different mindset, a different approach about ownership of money and how to build and maintain wealth. Yeah.
So, okay, so you were talking about, kind of the way that you learned it as young. I'll share my personal story very briefly. My mom and dad, first marriage for both of them, and they were married until mom passed away in 2020, right? So I had, in theory, that ideal nuclear family environment. Mom was a teacher, so she didn't make big money. Dad was a real estate broker, and you go, oh, they did well. Dad got into the business in 78. And if you know anything about what happened in the real estate market, my dad spent probably the first 5 years of his career going door to door, cold knocking on people's doors, trying to get them to sell their house. So, yeah, it was kind of rough. My parents never taught me anything about money until I was already an adult. And the problem with that is now a lot of the habits are already set, right? And I certainly had a lot of those. My mom she was cheap. She was tight, like what you're talking about. We used to tease as adults and say, Mom could squeeze a nickel until the buffalo pooped, right? I'm so glad they brought back the buffalo nickel, because I would tell that to people younger than me and they have no idea what I was talking about. Dad, on the other hand, was a spendthrift. If he got money in his hands that Mom didn't know about, he'd go buy something stupid with it. He's still that way to this day to an extent, right? And my sisters and I kind of freak out because of the way he spends money. But I kind of rebelled in my teenage years and in my early 20s against so much that I was taught. I think that's fairly normal. You know, young people rebel. It's part of that age. But I rebelled against being tight, and I spent money like my dad did, but I didn't have it, you know, and I got myself in a world of trouble, and it took forever to get out of it because I hadn't been taught how to manage those things properly. And then, you know, unfortunately, like so many people do, I got into a little bit of debt, and I dealt with that debt by getting more debt, right? So, you know, you live beyond your means a little bit, and then you struggle to get out of it. And then now I'm in my 20s. Now the advice starts coming in. Well, it's too late now. And the advice that I got was actually bad. It was pay off the highest interest rate debt that you have as viciously as you can. Mm-hmm. Notice I didn't say anything about having some kind of an emergency fund, because the emergency always showed up. Yeah. And then you had to go into more debt. One of the things that motivated me to become an advisor, especially in my early part of my career, was don't make the mistakes that I've made, right? Let me show you a better way to do it. So unfortunately, most of us do not learn from our parents good money habits. Even when our parents are good with money, they don't teach it. Something that I've done, you might want to put your 2 cents worth in here. I don't want my kids to go through some of the things that I went through because of my own ignorance and stupidity.
Yeah,
right?
And so mine will not. Yeah,
I have made it a point since mine were little, and so far, you know, mine are late teenage years. Technically, in December, I will only have one teenager left because he'll turn 20, but they're still, you know, young and immature in many ways. From the time they were little kids, they always got an allowance, but you got the allowance because you did the jobs. You didn't get it because you existed, and they were required to do the math of 10% goes to church. So tithing is very important in our family. My wife's family taught that to their kids. She doesn't know the difference. She doesn't know how not to tithe to church, right? So there's your charitable aspect that's psychologically very important, even if you're not a person of faith. So we made the kids 10% goes to church, and they had to put that separate, right? And they had to, you know, they physically put that on the offering plate back when we still did that. 20% had to go into savings. Now, that savings, we just explained, that's for a future date. We didn't say what it was for. I can tell you that they've never taken any money out of those savings. I still manage the accounts for them because they're more invested now. And then the other 70% you can spend on anything you want. But then something that I learned, and I could swear that I got this out of Dave Ramsey book. That may be wrong. We'll talk about Dave in a minute. My mom never let us make a mistake with money. And that in itself was a mistake. Let your kids make mistakes while they're young, and it's not as painful. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a great example of what I mean. When my youngest son, Casey, was fairly young, he was really into Star Wars Legos. Man, those things are expensive, right? Oh, my gosh, they're expensive. And he had one, it was a TIE fighter or something, I don't remember, that he was saving up his money for. Right? He was saving his 70% because that 20% savings, that's not for toys. He was saving it up because that's what he wanted. The two of us were out running some errands, and I don't know, he was maybe 10 years old, if that. And we had to run into Walmart for something. And he said, Dad, can we go over into the toy section and just walk through for a minute? Yeah, okay, we can go do that. We walked through, and he looks at the Legos, And of course, Walmart doesn't have the big box type Legos. They've got more the lower end stuff. And he sees one that was from Minecraft, which he was into that video game.
Yeah.
And he got so excited.
Stupid funny movie, by the way.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but he got so excited about this Lego set, which was not anywhere close to as nice as that TIE Fighter, and it was more than half of what the TIE Fighter would have cost. The TIE Fighter was like $80, and this was like $50. And he goes, Dad, can I get that? I said, you're saving up for a TIE Fighter. And he said, yeah, but I really want this. And I said, if you buy this, you will be upset. This is a mistake. But I'm going to let you do it if you want it. How much money do you have? And he told me how much he had saved up. And it was pretty much all of the money he'd saved up for this TIE Fighter he's now going to use. I said, all right, we'll go ahead and get it. You pay me the cash when we get home. 30 minutes after he got that thing out of the box, he was crying. He said, can we take it back? No, you can't take it back. And it was painful to let my kid hurt, right? But I know that now that mistake was made over a $50 Lego set instead over a $25,000 or $35,000 car that he finances at a rate that he can't really afford when he's 25 years old. And he spends the next 10 to 15 years dealing with a debt problem. Yeah. So that would be the biggest lesson that I learned the wrong way that I've tried to teach my kids. Let them screw up in such a way that you can save them because they're still young.
One of my favorite sayings is "stupid hurts," and
Yeah.
and that's probably more extreme than the example you're giving because that's not necessarily stupid, especially when you're a kid. But the idea behind it is when you make a mistake, it should hurt because if it doesn't hurt, then you don't learn from it.
Right, exactly. And pain is a wonderful teacher, right?
And so if you're going to, if you're going to make mistakes and have that pain come that's associated with mistakes, it's a lot better that, once again, to your point, that happens at an earlier age because the magnitude of those mistakes, the older you get, especially, it's not just not just necessarily based on your age, but you're talking about, as you get older, you're usually talking about much larger sums of money that you're making mistakes with. Right. So the magnitude just increases tenfold, right?
Yep. So
it's interesting because some of the things that I do with my kids, it definitely did not happen with me. And one, I was in a different place, than my kids are, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very, very, very clear with my kids constantly to make sure that they have a ton of gratitude for their station in life.
Yes, and I'm the same way, yeah.
Because they are living a completely different childhood than anything I got to do. Yeah. As I'm saying this on the eve of us going to Florida for another family vacation tomorrow, right, that we go pretty much every single year, right? That definitely not something that I did growing up. But anyway, my oldest daughter, when she turned 18, actually when she graduated from college, graduated from high school. I gave her a graduation gift, and it was an amount of money. Mm-hmm. And so, I was like, okay, well, here's your graduation gift. And I showed her the check and said, by the way, you're not going to get this right now.
What'd you do? And
I said, this is going to go into a Roth. And I said, you're working. You've been working. She was working through high school. She had jobs. I said, you've been working. You're 18. You graduated college. You graduated high school. We're opening up a Roth IRA for you. What's that? And, it's like, well, I've taught you about saving. This is the first step. And so we kind of went through the idea of a Roth. You're putting money in, after tax, it grows tax-free, comes out tax-free in retirement. Then we started showing her some spreadsheets and showing her, the value of compounding interest. And she's like, oh, okay, I get it. And I said, okay, well, I'm funding it with this, but what's in your bank account right now? And I made her tell me what was in her bank account. And I said, okay, you don't need all that.
Well played, Dad. I like that.
I said, this is you don't need all that money. There's no reason for you to have that much amount of money going into college. Trust me, I got on with way less. Especially with
being a broke college kid is kind of part of that experience. Isn't it?
And I was like, plus you got to do some working in college too, and you got to carry that forward, right? But so anyway, I funded it initially with a check with her graduation money, and then I made her take some of the funds that she had in her bank account and contribute to it. And we put a certain amount of money in there, and hey, guess what's happened over the last several years? It's worth quite a bit more.
Yeah.
It's worth quite a bit more money now, right? Because we put it into, obviously she's really young, put it into an aggressive portfolio, and we've had some good years in the market, so it's grown quite a bit.
And I would argue that that's really a legacy play too, because as you know, she can't use that money until basically she's in her 60s.
Well, and that's what I told her. I said, you're not going to like me now, but you're going to love me
later.
It's like when you're 50 years old, you're going to love me. You're going to look at the balance of this account, and you're going to absolutely love me and thank me, and hopefully I'm still around to hear that, right? Which by all accounts I should be. That's the value of having kids when you're young. So but yeah, so that was one thing. The other thing, and this was not around when my oldest daughter Kaylin, this is who I'm talking about, but my two younger kids, they have there's these kids debit cards now. I don't know if you've seen these. But we use this service called Busy Kid. There's another, like Green Light's another one. There's
I've heard of Green Light. I wasn't familiar with Busy Kid.
But basically, you can put money onto a debit card. Technically, it goes into an account for your kids, and it also comes with a debit card. And to the point that you were making earlier about, spend, save, give,
right?
It takes those exact same 3 buckets of money.
Excellent.
And so when the kids do chores, we don't pay them directly. We pay them to their Busy Kid account.
Right.
And it goes to their Busy Kid account, and 10% give, 20% savings. The rest goes on to their debit card, and they go to the store and use it like a debit card. And so there's an app. They have they have phones now. They can pull up their app, and they can see how much money is on their Busy Kid debit card, and they can see what's being there for savings. And eventually, when it gets big enough, we'll take that money and do something with it and invest it. But they can see how much is in savings, how much is in giving, and they can also see what's available for them to go buy the Lego sets. And in my daughter's case right now, it's all nail stuff. That's her. And actually, it's interesting because she's basically started her own little nail business. So she's doing acrylic nails for her friends and other girls that she knows, and so she's charging them a little bit of money, and so she's got a little side hustle.
All right, good for her.
At her age, at 13 years old. So she's still learning, and it's actually the really funny part about it is, because she keeps wanting to upgrade and like I need better materials because I can do better nails and do all this. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, how much do those cost? How much are you charging? And so we're learning real business lessons when she's still in middle school, when she's still in grade school, that she's going to carry forward for the rest of her life, because she's learning on, once again, a very, very small scale. It's really hard for her to make mistakes because obviously she's still living at home, and the stakes are minimal with the nail business that she's doing out of her house, right? But she's learning the idea behind, okay, this is the money that I have to pay for supplies. These are my operational expenses, basically.
She's learning how to be an entrepreneur and how to run a business.
Exactly.
Good. That's fantastic.
And so it's been really, really fun watching her do that.
That's awesome. This is a totally different train of thought, but that's something for the people who are listening that have children at home, or maybe you have grandchildren if you're listening to this. I think that's a big one. The reason why most businesses fail is because you're passionate about making a product or providing a service, but you don't know how to run the business.
You have a skill.
Right. You've got that skill, but you still need to know how to run a business, and they don't have that skill, and that's why they fail. And your daughter is learning that skill, however she decides to apply it later in life. That's awesome. I wish everybody knew how to do that.
Yeah.
There would be that much more innovation and businesses in our world.
That goes back to the idea that those were things that I never learned.
Right.
Because my parents weren't business owners. I'm a business owner. I've got a couple of businesses, actually. So it's easier for me as a business owner who's got a couple of businesses that, knock on wood, are fairly successful. We're doing okay, right? So I can teach those ideas. It's a mindset. It's really a different mindset. And so the mindset that I'm able to have my kids grow up in, that of an entrepreneur, that of a business owner, thinking maybe a little bit more behind the scenes as opposed to just trying to find a job to make a few bucks. Those are the types of lessons that bleed into your mindset about money as a whole. And this gets into investing and the value of investing and why you should invest. Because so many people think about investing as it's almost like it's not tangible. It's just you put money in a 401k and you do it and it goes up and it goes down. But most people don't truly understand what investments are.
You're right.
Investments are ownership. Investments are business ownership. You are buying equity. Right. They're called equities for a reason. It's because you're buying equity. You're buying stock in companies. You're buying ownership. Right. And if those companies succeed, you participate in the profits. Right. That's what investments are. It's ownership and equity in things that can go up or down based upon how well those businesses do. And so most people intrinsically don't understand the value of that, and they don't understand that small businesses are investments.
Yep, they sure are.
Our business,
is an
Is
investment.
an
That's
investment, right? It's a different type of investment, but it's an investment. We have equity, we have ownership.
Right.
And so it's not really something, I didn't really understand that mentality because my parents weren't business owners growing up. And so that's one of the greatest things that we can instill in our kids. And really, I think more and more people should encourage it. And I wish schools taught entrepreneurship and business ownership and just more financial courses in general.
I wish they teach them how to balance a checkbook, but that's a different story.
How to write a check in the first place.
How to write a check would be, and
that's
people
a
say, well,
lost art.
checks don't exist anymore. Yeah, they do.
They do.
They're still out there. They're just not as common. Okay, so I think we've kind of pounded on the first way that people learn, and that is from the experiences, intentional or unintentional, of their youth and childhood. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about we learn from, and this is the wrong word, but I don't have the right one, people who are influencers. Now, I'm not talking about online social media influencers. I'm talking about people who are published authors, public speakers, things of that nature. Maybe they have TV shows. They have a background that is well known of either success or failure and lessons that they've learned and put them out there. And a bunch of names pop into my mind. Probably the most famous would be Dave Ramsey. But I'm a big fan of the Charles Paynes of the world. And I know a lot of people really get into Susie Ormond. And we could probably come up with 30 or 40 if we just brainstorms off the top of our heads. You know, in the Dave Ramsey case, both of us used to be part of the program that Ramsey does for how his followers seek out a financial advisor locally. And, you know, one of the things that I've learned from all of the Dave Ramsey clients that I've worked with over the years is that there are two different types of people who are following Dave in this case, but certainly others would be no different. There's the people who are latching on to him because he is preaching a message that is right in their face. This is my problem, and you're the guy who preaches about this. So in that particular case, it would be people that are they got a debt problem, they got a spending problem, they got a consumerism problem, whatever you want to call it, right? So that's his bailiwick is dealing with debt and getting out of debt. But I also found there's an awful lot of people that come out of that type of program that they don't have a spending problem, but they don't know who to trust. So they latch onto somebody that they believe is trustworthy, and I could argue in most cases probably is.
And then they apply that trust to everything that they say.
Exactly. And that's where you run into both good and bad. So,
well, there's so many examples like that are well beyond the finance world.
Yes.
But yes, to take Dave Ramsey specifically, right? So if we're going to talk about Dave Ramsey, wonderful, by all accounts, seems like a wonderful guy. I would love to meet him one day.
I suspect I would probably get along pretty well with him.
Read a lot of his stuff, believe in a lot of the stuff that he preaches about, but you have to understand what he is and what his brand specifically is.
Right.
His brand is getting out of debt, controlling your debt, getting out of debt. He's the get out of debt guy.
Right.
And he's provided some very valuable advice to millions of families. I personally know families that he has helped tremendously, and he has done a very, very valuable service, and he's just a wonderful speaker and communicator around the value of getting out of debt and living a debt-free lifestyle. So when it comes to Dave Ramsey or anybody else, you have to understand what their brand is. Because so many times in order for someone like Dave Ramsey to become the brand that he is, you can't really do that by providing a lot of nuance around things.
Right.
You kind of have to provide black and white guardrails.
They have to give generic advice because they don't know who is listening or watching.
And they have to give very black and white advice. Like you have to, these are the guardrails, and you have to stay within these guardrails. This is the plan. Yeah. A lot of times it's because there's a lot of people that truly don't understand nuance or won't apply it correctly in their case. So they need the guardrails, and it's very important for them to have it, or else they'll go, if you start providing too much nuance or too much context, then they're going to go outside of those guardrails constantly. So that's what he does. He provides a framework, a very valuable framework for getting out of debt.
Right.
But what so many people do is they apply, he's fantastic at this one thing, and he is amazing, and he's great. But then they apply that trust that they have in him from a get out of debt perspective to his perspective on investments or other things. And I don't know what else he really talks about too terribly much, but as it relates to investments, I do know his philosophy. In the way that he talks about his philosophy when it comes to investments, he very much does not give too much color.
No, he doesn't.
Around investments.
4 things.
He talks about 4 things, and you'll have to forgive me. I don't remember exactly what they are, but it's like aggressive growth, international, and
growth and income.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah,
I had them memorized at one point in time, but yeah, you're
so
you're
basically
right on
get you 4 mutual funds, put all your money in those,
and it was 25% in each one of those.
Yeah,
by the
it's
way.
25% in each one of those categories. But notice that in all 4 of those are all risky investment classes. So if your only exposure to investments is 100% pure risk on, for lack of a better term, those are all aggressive growth categories, and so you can get into some trouble.
Yes, you can.
Doing that, depending upon your age, and providing additional context or additional nuance to your specific situation. But Dave can't provide that nuance to all of his millions of listeners that listen to his show every day. That's why he had the program that he used guys like us around the country. But it's an impossible gig for him to be able to provide that level of nuance, because if he goes on radio every day and says, well, I don't know, it depends. 1, that's a really boring radio show.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
And then 2, his people lose kind of faith in his ability to give advice, because they keep hearing the same advice over and over. But quite frankly, in real life, for 99% of people, the answer for most questions, specifically as it relates to money and finance and investments, the answer is it depends. And it depends on your individual situation. It depends upon your lifestyle. It depends upon how much money you need, when you need access to that money. What's your risk tolerance? What does your debt look like?
and in his defense, and not just him, but the whole concept.
Yeah, we're using him as a proxy.
Yeah, we're picking on him a little bit, but that's not the intent. He has the 7 baby steps concept, which, quite frankly, I was talking about my situation. I learned the hard way dealing with debt, because I was advised to leave out step number 1, right, which was to get you $1,000 emergency fund. That's the reason I kept running into trouble. I think, and he cannot say this, and you just explained why, right, if he says depends. I think when you get to what he calls step 6 and 7, which is where you're investing and you're paying off mortgage, which is your last debt item, I think he's kind of hoping at that point in time that you will have become savvy enough to know that you need professional help, which is why they've got a program to go out and find investors out there, or investment advisors.
And that's his idea, for sure. Yeah.
But he can't say that. To your point, that makes for a really boring radio show, right? Yeah. And number 2, there are a lot of people out there who are going to say, I can do this on my own. And if he's giving advice that is nuanced, the guy who really isn't ready for those steps yet is going to try to do that. They're going to try to cheat the system a little bit, if you will, and they'll end up right back where they were because they did it the wrong way, right? Yeah. So,
and to be clear, the advice he gives around investments isn't necessarily incorrect. It's not complete.
Right.
Building a diversified portfolio, and in theory, that's what he's talking about, is building a diversified portfolio. Right. Fantastic advice. Now, what he talks about putting in that diversified portfolio, I would disagree with. But that's neither here nor there. But once again, that gets back to context and nuance, right? It depends on your situation, how diversified, or the way that we diversify a portfolio. It basically entails, all of your individual positions and what your lifestyle looks like, and all those things that we talk about constantly. And that's where the planning comes into play. But it's not incorrect advice; it's incomplete advice,
right?
And that's what's really, really important to remember, especially when you talk to, like, Susie Orman's another example. And I haven't heard any of her stuff recently. I know I don't even know.
It's been a while since I've seen anything from her.
She used to be very, very popular, but one of her sticking points was, and this was once again when I worked for an insurance company for a good chunk of my life. We always ragged on Susie Orman because she was very black and white when it came to annuities. And she was like, annuities are bad. Never use annuities. Never use annuities. Annuities are horrible. You should never use one. That kind of became part of her brand. And it's a lot easier to go on TV and draw a line on the sand and create a brand around something. And you're going to alienate a good chunk of viewers, but you're also going to draw in a number of other viewers who agree with your position, right? And it's a lot harder to go on and say, well, they're not all good or bad. They're what are all the analogies? It's a tool in the toolbox. Right. It's a golf club in the bag, right? All those analogies that we use all the time to provide context and nuance. She can't do that on TV.
No, she can't. It's just impossible to do. It's the same problem that Dave Ramsey has, because he has the same thing with annuities and with certain types of life insurance, permanent life insurance, stuff like that. They can't put the nuance out there because people will do the wrong things on accident. And I think that also goes back to people don't understand how these things work. So, they don't understand that annuities used incorrectly are potentially dangerous, things like that. And we did an episode, I don't know, a 3 weeks ago where we talked about annuities.
So another one that's very, very popular that a lot of people look to is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And you were talking about this the other day. In the framework around, because I've never actually read that book. Yep. I've read plenty of other ones in our industry, but I've never read that one. But, kind of the framework around that is, the idea of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner,
right.
and the mindset around how you make and keep money, which is all fantastic. But then you go into his advice around investments and basically what he's done over the last 20 years and the investments that he's pitched. If you've been listening to his investments advice, you would have lost a lot of money. Right. Or you would have not earned, I shouldn't say you would have lost. You would have lost out on the opportunity to earn a lot more money in other better investments if you had strictly been listening to his investment advice. Investments are not his bailiwick. His bailiwick was the psychology of money, how to earn money, how to make it, how to think about it. It's not about actually keeping it and investing in it.
Right. And by the way, if you haven't read that one, it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad's a fantastic book. I personally do not invest the way that he does. He's kind of a real estate guy, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, he's turned into strictly a commodities, gold, silver
and he's
guy.
Gotten into commodities now too.
Yeah.
But his concepts were great. We took a family vacation, 2-3 years ago, where we drove all the way to Miami. I don't ever recommend doing that.
Oh, man.
This is not driving to Miami and stopping at a lot of cool places on the way. We got to make time. We got to make time.
Go through Alligator Alcatraz down there?
No, it wasn't there at the time, but we drove right through that area. We were going on a cruise that sailed out of Miami. But so myself, my wife, and the 2 boys, I said, okay, here's what we're going to do as part of our exercise. We are going to read while we're driving Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I made the boys read it out loud. So they would take turns. Well, they hated me for that, but
I don't blame them.
Especially my older son, who's kind of introverted anyway. But it did help them with reading aloud, diction. Yeah. So there was a little bit of an English education there too. But it forced them to read the book, right? And there's some fantastic concepts in there. And for those of you that don't know, the concept behind that one was that he had his own personal dad who was a very high income earner, and his mom was a very high income earner, but they were horrible with money. Gee, we've never heard that before, right? And then he had a friend whose dad was like a second father to him, who didn't make a lot of money, but he had an entrepreneurial mindset. And it was all about taking the money that you have and making it make you more money, making it work for you. And that dad's going to end up being the wealthier person when it comes to total assets at some point in time down the road. It's a great book. I would highly recommend it. But anyway, the point is, it's also incomplete advice.
Yeah.
Right? It really is. And that's why we have so many people with so many things that they do wrong, which is why we decided to talk about this subject. So I want to stop for a moment. We're probably a little bit more than halfway in. I want to go back and let's start talking about bourbon. What are you thinking so far about the old Granddad 16?
So it's interesting. So
now, first of all, this is a 100 proof. I do not believe it is bottled in bond. I don't think it is. It certainly doesn't say that on the bottle. Yeah. But it is a 100 proof bourbon.
So it's definitely a rye. It's definitely got some spice, a little bit of kick to it. It's interesting because all of the aftertaste stays in your gums, your lips.
Yeah, there's nothing coming down the chest.
It's smooth.
It's all up in here, yes.
It goes down really smooth.
I think part of that is the age. There's and we've talked about this before, the ideal age for lots of different flavors and complexities is usually around 12 years old. When you get past that, the oak starts getting more and more, I don't want to say overwhelming, but more prevalent, right? This one's still got some complexity, not as much as it would a 12-year, but it's still got some. At first, I'm with you. It had this nice spiciness to it, not heat like it was an alcohol heat, but it was a flavor spice, and I like that. It also had some other little, to use the word we were talking about with money, it had some nuances to it. Maybe a little bit of chocolatey flavors, things like that. When I put 2 drops of water, a very small amount, the chocolate disappeared. And the caramel, which is a fairly common flavor in bourbon, really started coming out. Yeah. But that spice was still there. That is definitely a high rye bourbon, and it's got a lot of spice to it. But this doesn't taste like something that's 16 years old.
It's probably one of the smoothest ryes I've ever. Mm-hmm. I don't love ryes as a rule. High rise, I should say, but I like this one for sure, and it's got to be the smoothest rye I've had. Yeah. I can't think of one I've had that was smoother than this.
Yeah, this is very flavorful, not complex, but this is something that you could really sit down and enjoy. Unfortunately, it's a limited edition, and according to Jim Beam, they're never going to make it again.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's probably not true. They'll make a variation of it. They'll have a 17-year or a 15-year or something, and they'll put some incredibly stupid high price tag on it, and idiots like me will go out there and buy it, right?
They should be making a lot more of this than that regular Jim Beam.
But you know what? Okay, we go back to business again.
Yeah, I know.
It's that cheap entry-level crap that people buy in mass.
Hey, it's that cheap entry-level crap that got me through college when I was broke.
Exactly
going back to bring this thing full circle, right?
Yeah, going. You talk about Buffalo Trace, probably the most famous distillery out there, certainly outside of Kentucky, right? In Kentucky, we know them all. Buffalo Trace has, obviously, they've got the Blantons, and they've got the Eagle Rares and the Wellers, and all that stuff comes out of that same distillery in Frankfurt. What's their number one selling product? By far.
Buffalo Trace.
No. It's not Buffalo Trace. It's Fireball.
Which
is horrible. That stuff is garbage.
Well,
that's a fraternity party. My wife, for the first time in her life, just the other night, my one son's out of town, the other son was working. There was nothing on TV, and we just turned it on. And she watched start to finish for the first time in her life. We did skip a couple of scenes. Animal House. Right? Now think about that. That's what Fireball is for those kind of things. Not for sitting around and drinking bourbon. So when I did cut it, I got lots of caramel, lots of sweet. It's not a super high corn. I think it was 60-something%. So it's got some sweetness to it. I wish they would make this again. And I wish they would sell it at a cheaper price, because if you're listening to me, Jim Beam people, this is excellent, and we could sell a lot more of this.
With the price that you pay, you probably wouldn't want to do this, but this would be a great, Manhattan.
Yeah, this probably would be a good Manhattan. That rye would really pop out. Yeah.
I don't know if you necessarily want to put this in a cocktail because of the expense, but it would be really good.
I personally would not. I don't make that kind of money.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So.
But you know what? That actually brings something up. Maybe we should have a cocktail episode. Maybe we'll do a good Manhattan. I've got a recipe that I've been tweaking that might be fun. People would enjoy that.
I would enjoy it too.
All right, so let's go back into there was another type of quote unquote influencer that I wanted to bring up that are typically people who've been very successful. This is not the TikTok guy. We're going to get to him. These are the people that you and I like to watch. These are the Charles Paynes of the world, for example. And if you don't know who Charles Payne is, he's a very successful investment guy. He's got a show on Fox Business every day. I watch it every day. I pay attention. The problem with these types of people is they are teaching you how to buy individual stocks typically. They don't deal much in the bond market. There are exceptions. His first name popped out of my head, Cramer on CNBC. Jim Cramer, thank you. These types of guys, they're not teaching you how to build portfolios and wealth. They're teaching you, or they're trying to give you advice on buying individual securities, right? Well, this is more the day trader crowd, really.
Let's back up a step from there, because that's actually, yes, but that's not really what they're doing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to put on an entertaining TV show.
Yeah, okay, yes, correct.
And so you always, at its very core, you have to remember these guys are entertainers first. They don't care about the value of their advice. They don't.
No.
They care that you watch. Okay. Hopefully there's some of their advice hits and some of their stock picks hit. But what's also interesting about these shows is they spend a whole ton of time talking about the stocks that you should buy.
Yep.
And some of the stocks that you should sell. But they don't necessarily come back and tell you specifically, oh, I told you to buy this one on this date. You should have already, now you need to sell it today. It's not usually, they don't usually circle back and give you, because any part of a trade, it's always interesting. Whenever you talk about day trading, you're just trading in general. Mm-hmm. This is why it's so incredibly hard to be a good trader. Everybody thinks, oh, you buy low, sell high. When do you buy again? When do you sell again? When do you buy again? When do you sell again? When do you do it over and over and over? Because if you're going to trade, if you're going to be a day trader, that's your job. You don't buy low, sell high, and then it's done.
Right. Yeah, it's an ongoing
You got to do it again. And so, yeah, you can be right once. You can even be right twice. Can you do that repeatedly over and over again and not make any unbearably wrong mistakes that you can't recover from? And that's the problem with day trading. And that's the issue with a lot of these shows. They're entertainment, one. Then, yes, they spend a lot of time, an inordinate amount of time, talking about individual securities, about stocks. But they never really come back and circle back to, okay, I told you to sell, now you need to buy, or vice versa. Right? It's just always kind of what's the topic of the day, what the hottest stocks of the day are, but they never circle that loop, so to speak.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. There are
good. It's advice, but it's not complete advice. It's not bad advice, but it's not complete advice.
Kind of goes back to the other ones that we've mentioned.
Yeah,
it's not customized to the individual. It's not nuanced was the word you keep coming back to, and you're spot on with that. That is the problem with getting your financial education from those things. You said it. This show is about entertainment. It's about selling a product because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell the show, and therefore the advertisements come along. That's how they make their money. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're trying to learn about individual things. Mm-hmm.
Now going on to, you said the TikTokers.
All right, let's get into social media influencers, where the word influencer. Where do we want to go first?
So everything that I said about Dave Ramsey being a brand and trying to create a brand and trying to stick with kind of same thing with Susie Ormond and the Rich Dad Poor Dad guy, and they build all that they spend all this time building a brand, and now they have to stick to the brand. Well, now you're talking about a TikTok generation that's creating very micro bite-sized versions of
20,
everything
30
that those guys are
stuff,
doing.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very deliberate in a brand that you're creating in 30-second to 60-second video clips that are going online or on Twitter, 140 characters, however many characters it is now. And so basically you're getting very bite-sized advice that has zero nuance whatsoever.
Right.
Because they don't even have time or the ability to provide any nuance. You can't grow a social media following with nuance. The algorithms do not reward nuance. They don't reward context. You see this. We're talking about the financial world right now, but apply this to any segment of the world. Let's start with politics because that tends to be the most divisive. Well, who are the loudest voices that you see online? Extreme left, extreme right. Okay. Why do you see that? Because the algorithms reward conviction.
Yeah.
Right? Conviction. And I don't care, there's no room for context there. You have to draw a line in the sand. You're either with me or against me, because that's what creates what? Comments, buzz. It creates engagement. Okay. Lines in the sand and clickbait, as you might want to call it, right? That's what creates engagement. That's what gets you followers. That's what builds the influencer status for all of these people. Mm-hmm. So if you're taking very nuanced positions, it's not going to generate content. Now I can tell you from personal experience, right? It's not like we're very, it's not like we're blowing up on TikTok. We don't have millions
of followers, right?
Yeah, we're not blowing up on TikTok, and we put all these clips out there, and and we get some followers, but we're not by any means
Here's an
influencers.
Opportunity to just say like and subscribe. Click the box,
it's a great time to say like and subscribe, but all that to say, providing nuance and providing clarity and context in short micro doses is damn near impossible.
Yeah. We were talking about this before we started recording. The problem with getting advice from true social media influencers is exactly what you just said. It's not that these people have some great success or failures that they've learned from, like the other people we were talking about. You know, the reason that Dave Ramsey has such a good following is not just because he's good at sending a message. It's because he's done this wrong multiple times. He's learned his lessons, and now he has a story to tell. When you're dealing with the people, especially TikTok and Twitter or X or whatever it is, because it's such a short little snippet, we don't have an opportunity to vet the people that are putting this content out. What they are good at, and you were explaining it to me because I'm an idiot when it comes to social media stuff. What they are good at is using the algorithm to actually get whatever they're saying out there. That's where their true expertise is getting followers, getting clicks, getting likes, getting comments. It has nothing to do with whether the advice is any good or not. And that, to me, is what makes it inherently dangerous.
To be clear, most of the influencers in our world, finfluencers, right? Financial.
Is that a real word? I like it.
It's okay. A real word. Financial influencers. But most of the people in that world, in that space, the biggest ones, are dead wrong on so many things.
Yeah.
But you know why they're dead wrong on so many things? Because that's what creates, it's called engagement farming. That's what creates engagement. They get followers not because people are telling them in the comments, great advice, that's fantastic. Right. Most of the comments are telling them how wrong they are. Yeah. They don't care if you agree or disagree. You're commenting, which only feeds the algorithm, and they're getting more and more people liking and commenting and disagreeing in the comments, and then you're getting arguments started in the comment section, right? That's why you never delve into the comment section. Rule number 1 of internet, right? Don't start wading into the waters of the comment section, because that's where stuff gets ugly.
It always frustrates me when people put their opinions, people that I know will put their opinions down. It's like, I didn't have a bad opinion of you before. Now I do. All you had to do was shut up, right? Yeah. Don't make the comment.
So, but yeah, that they're not there to provide correct advice. They're there to gain a following. And what's interesting in our world too, you almost have to understand who you're getting the information from, because in our world we are with a firm that's registered with the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. We get audited. We
just went through it.
We have very specific guidelines that we have to stay within when we are providing any kind of commentary on pretty much anything, okay? And we know, and we stay within those guidelines. We know what we can and can't say, and it's not like we're out here providing anything fantastical. We're not talking about returns or anything like that, right? So we know what we can and can't say. But all that to say, we are bound by a fiduciary duty, right, to say certain things and talk about things in a certain way. We can't get too terribly fantastical with any direction that we go or any commentary that we provide. Well, most of the people that you see online don't have that same responsibility.
Have that standard, right?
They don't have that fiduciary standard that they have to live up to, so they can kind of throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks from an engagement farming perspective. But a lot of people take that advice seriously, and those are the wrong people you should be taking advice from, because they don't necessarily care if the information is correct. You have to consider the source, right? You have to consider why they're providing that information, or what it is, what their day job is, for lack of a better term, because our day job precludes us from saying a lot of things online, which is fine. We're not going to say a lot of those fantastical things anyway, because we don't believe them, because we understand that true financial planning requires a lot of context and nuance to every single individual situation.
I am so glad that you used that phrase, because up until 30 seconds ago, I'd never heard it. Engagement farming. I had no idea that was a thing, but it's very clear to me what it means when you say it. Now, this is where you and I are 10 years difference in age, and that is that window where there is a certain knowledge of the way these things works is kind of cut off. The fact that people are actually putting something out there and they don't care whether it's correct or not. What they care about is getting as many engagements as they can. Because there is a way, and this is part of that world that's over my head a little bit, there is a way, if you get enough followers, you can start monetizing this world. And it's not something that I'm interested in doing, but it makes sense when you say that phrase, engagement farming. It makes sense why there is so much content out there, as opposed to just, well, I heard something really cool, I thought I'd say it. There's a motive behind this.
Glad I could teach you something about that fancy new internet thing that they got going on. So
you know what? Part of me is like, I wish we didn't have this stuff. You know, it's fantastic sometimes, but it's not fantastic others. As we put this out in that very format that we're talking about. So. Before we go on any further, and I think we probably kind of beat this a little bit, is that people are getting their financial education incorrectly. They are getting it from places where they're getting incorrect or just false information in some cases. We talked about how important it is as parents or as grandparents that you're actually intentionally teaching children and grandchildren good financial habits, things like that, so that they don't have to learn the hard way.
Teaching/showing them.
Yeah, exactly. Remember that you are teaching them, whether you're intending to do it or not. You are teaching them. So be aware. Kids are incredible observers. You told us, or told me, I'm sorry, me, myself, and I, us, right? Before we started, you said you were going to throw me under the bus and you were going to throw a question at me that I was not prepared for.
Well, we're going to have to do that for another topic.
Oh, we're going to do that for another topic?
We're an hour in.
Okay.
And so, that's going to be a whole other.
Oh,
so that might be a whole other episode.
You realize I'm going to lose sleep over this over the next week, right?
No, you'll be fine. We'll have to come back and do another episode on that topic. And I think that's going to fall under the construct of, mistakes that we see people make with their money.
That's a great topic.
And I think this is going to be part of that maybe series.
Yeah, I think that would be
part of a topic.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll probably save that as a teaser, if you will.
That's next week.
That's called engagement farming, Chris. What I just did, right?
See, I'm learning.
So yeah. Come back and watch this next time. Right?
All right. So final review on the old Granddad 16.
It's good. I like it.
Pretty good stuff, right?
Yeah, really good.
Is it worth the amount of money that it was paid for?
Oh, God, no.
Let's be real honest. Is any of this stuff worth?
God, no.
What we pay for it? But
that's me being cheap because I grew up without money, and I can't imagine spending $200 on a bottle of bourbon.
And that's me being a rebel because I was not allowed to spend money. I'd never had a full stick of gum. Remember the sticks of gum? Never had one until I was an adult. Mom would only give us half.
Give us half, yeah.
And
I've been there.
All the flavor was gone within, 15, 20 seconds. So I'm still rebelling, Mom.
I still get mad at my wife for using too much body wash in the shower because that stuff's expensive. And it's like you don't need that much, and then you just waste most of it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I still carry so many turning off the lights whenever I leave a room.
Yeah, I do that.
Actually, this is another episode of all our quirks that we have around.
That would be a good episode too.
Let's talk. We'll do a whole episode on how cheap Eric is. We'll do that one. That'll be a fun one.
All right.
All that to say, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like, rate, subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time.